Did you guys see there was 1 million outdoor plants tagged in metric in Michigan this year?
Really? That's insane.
1 million.
A million.
1 million outdoor plant tags in metric.
It's a lot of flower.
Yeah. And I feel it's like I've been like complaining about the black market all year, and it's like
It's the metric market.
A million.
1 million outdoor plants. That's crazy.
Wonder how many of those actually got finished.
Well, I also wonder what the yield was on a lot of them because I've seen some pretty small plants out there.
Absolutely. But you know, this year is supposed to be a bumper crop just because it's been nationwide because the weather was so good, right? Like last year the weather was horrible.
Yes and no, but it was cold in our area, you know.
It was a lot less wet though.
A lot less wet, but a lot more cold, so the cold brings a lower yield typically.
Sure. Less mold, less rot.
Yeah, it was definitely humid later in the year last year, it seemed like.
Oh, yeah.
This year it dried up pretty quick.
Yeah.
There were some brutal fucking days though. I wasn't there, but
Last year or
I
this
heard
year?
this year.
Yeah.
But I heard down south, like, they didn't get that same cold
Weather pattern,
Yeah,
yeah.
they kind of, I think the southern side of
We
the
had
state.
what, Charlie, like down to 37 degrees, like in August and like even July had some cold nights.
Yeah, July was cold. There was like 2 nights in August that we were approaching freezing, like getting close to it. And then September hit and we started freezing,
Yeah.
you know, and then October, more freezing. But it's amazing the resilience, you know, like I wasn't quite sure. Like in my heart of hearts, some of those days I was out there at 5:30 in the morning, like, holy shit. Okay, they're all right, you know. And
I personally don't think we got the swell that we got last year.
they survived.
They survived, but they didn't. They never.
Get that last little
Right.
push.
Yeah.
Certain cultivars you could tell were able to push kind of through the cold and like kind of swell, but like white truffle's a great example. Like
Yeah.
you weren't getting anything.
She don't
out
like
of
the
that.
cold.
No.
I came out there one day and there was like cola buds that were like ice cubes.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's a big frozen cola. It's like, oh.
Yeah. It's amazing what if it burns off quick enough and it's gone, how little damage it can do to the plant.
A lot of fog in the mornings too.
Yep.
Cold fog.
I was impressed with the people. I was worried that the people weren't going to make it.
Man,
They're just as strong as the plant, dude, because some of those dudes, just every day, they're there. I wouldn't. I don't know that I could be there.
Rainy and 37 degrees.
It's amazing what they push through, those guys, for sure.
And the attitude they had while they were doing it. Like some of them like embraced the suck to a whole new level.
Yeah.
Like loved it.
Yeah.
Like Dave, we're just rocking, you know?
Yeah.
Like
He's
you are
always
rocking.
pumped
You're the
up.
fucking man, dude. Because I'm fucking cold for you, bud. And it's fucking wild.
Then you had temporary superpowers, like guys that would show up. You'd be like, "Look at that dude! He's a crusher." 2 days later, gone.
Yep.
You know, like yeah, he came and put everything he had in them 2 days. Didn't get what he needed out of it.
Yeah.
Tried to cheat their hours.
Temp workers are
I
interesting.
remember. Yeah, I came out one day. There's a dude. He's soaked head to toe. Soaked. It's cold out. He's wet. You know. And I'm like, "Hey, bud, we got rain gear in there. You know." Oh no, I'm good, man. I do this all the time. You know. Like, what? You work in the freezing cold, wet all the time, bud?
I
Like,
love being cold.
Yeah, he lasted a couple more days.
That's rough. That's super rough. Yeah, cannabis research bill. It's more bullshit. I mean, that dude's not for legalization.
He's
He's probably going to forget about it anyways. It was on blacklist, so.
Yeah,
They're trying to figure out how to fuck us.
pretty much.
Yeah. I think he gave them like 60 days to either approve an existing research proposal or put out an RFP for additional research. So, of course, they're not going to approve something that's already there. They're going to stretch it out, put out an RFP for some research, and that's going to start a long-ass process. And it's probably going to wind up going to some fucking pharmaceutical company to do research, right? Because that's how shit goes in the government.
Yeah.
It's not going to go to some university that actually wants to do research, has a cannabis program. So more cannabis bullshit from the government. And, you know, there's always like some shit they're trying to pull. Like, I I think one of the senators from Oregon just proposed that the SBA needs to start giving small business loans to cannabis companies. Like, yeah, great idea, but it's still federally illegal.
Right.
SBA loans are federally backed. Like, it's not going to happen. Why do you keep proposing dumb bullshit that just isn't feasible?
Yeah, spend some time on something that could maybe happen.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
just trying to keep voter base.
Yeah, or like
all
they're
it
also
is,
proposing interstate trafficking right now.
Yeah.
Oregon is. Like they like brought up some old statute that they should be able to sell from the state of Oregon into other states.
Yeah.
Just not going to happen.
And what did Biden do? He passed that thing where he was supposed to free all the federal inmates that were in for possession, but who's in
Right.
federal prison for possession?
Exactly.
Nobody.
Smokes.
150 people or something. You know.
Yeah. Bullshit.
Yeah, it's
I thought
all
it was
media,
less-
political, like it's just a show face basically.
Yeah.
Get people hyped up, but it does nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More posturing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it.
What do you guys think about state testing labs? It's been discussed in Michigan because there's one big lab, Virtus. They do an enormous proportion of the testing in the state. There's a significant number of product that's testing over 28% now. I think the number has gone from like 8% of flower testing over 28% to now 28% testing over 28%. Do you guys think that state testing labs are the way to go?
I mean, you got to have some type of testing, right? But there's tons of variants. Look, we've used 3-4 different labs over the years, and it's like they're so much different from each other every time, and their processes are different. I'm assuming their equipment's different in their lab, so it would be nice to have something universal, right? And then what is it, a plus or minus of 10% or something crazy like that?
Yeah, standard
So you're
deviation
going
is
from
crazy.
15 to 5 to 25.
Right.
Yeah.
It's pretty big, you know. So I don't know. Is the state lab the way to go? I don't know about that. I like individuals owning it, but I'd like to see some more uniform processes, equipment.
Yeah, I think from like the Virtus perspective, they have a proprietary technology that they use that's different than the rest of the labs. And so that's why, you know, when they get called on their testing results stand up based on their SOPs for the kind of testing that they do.
Right.
And the state just doesn't have an answer for it.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if the states even has a specialty person into it, or if it's just like the same thing we go through, where a guy from the CRA and a guy from BFS comes out there, does some inspections, and they walk
Right.
away from it, and they show their certificates of their stuff, right? Like processing or whatever else. Like
Right.
it's probably the same process. It's not like they have someone who knows the equipment, knows the lab to go in and be like, well, I call bullshit, or you know.
There's
Yeah,
no-
telling them how to do their job. There's no one doing that. It doesn't seem like
There's
it.
no standardized procedure. That's the.
We used to use the Spot way back in the day in Kalamazoo, and I've heard they like shut down their business basically because they're kind of up in arms at the fact that, yeah, I guess they're kind of historically one of the lower THC testing places, and I think their business has just probably taken a shit, and now they're like, fuck it, we're not even going to run the business until there is some type of, you know, way for them
Standard.
to regulate. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's what you were saying is basically like in the bureaucracy, some guy who comes from like you know the fucking building department is making decisions about cannabis regulations and fucking science related to cannabis, not some fucking smart ass
Yeah.
scientist, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same in the extraction lab, right? We set up a extraction lab, explosion-proof room, you know, all the different type of extract, but there's no one that knows that equipment that's coming out to inspect it. It's CRA, BFS.
Right.
You know, I guess building fire safety knows the procedure best, or what would happen in a worst-case scenario best, but they don't know what that equipment really does, or how it works, or what could go wrong where,
Or
unless you tell them.
what kind of fail-safe it's capable of,
Right.
and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's an opportunity maybe to have a little bit of best of both worlds, where like, you know, the testing is not mandated or the labs aren't owned or run by the state, but maybe the state has someone who sets like the standards
Right.
for all these labs, and they're out there working with the labs to make sure that you have as much continuity between this lab and this lab and this lab, because then you don't have the folks who are saying, hey, we don't even feel like we're getting a fair shake at doing business out here, because we're either testing a different way with a different methodology that is supposed to bring us to the same result but isn't, or there's some sort of foul play going on. And you know, and so I don't know. I personally don't necessarily see the state having control of a lab as being valuable, because we all understand how long it takes to get inspections done and get people out. Like if we were trying to get all this, outdoor smokable flower out, and we were waiting months and months to get, COAs back, like business wouldn't be happening. Yeah. So I think the privatization of the businesses is key, because, some folks are going to get after it and do the best they can to serve growers. But maybe a little bit of like guidance and like rails on how we do this.
Yeah. I think that one of the problems is that they don't bring in anybody from the industry when they set up the regulations in the states. So like you look at every state that's gone rec, you would think that as states come online, they would look at the other states that have gone before them and think, all right, these guys did this well, these guys did this well, here are the mistakes that were made. Let's build our legislation around that. But nobody does that. They don't bring in people from the industry who actually know this shit. Nobody in the government knows anything about cannabis, cultivation or processing or retail. Like,
yeah, even metric for that matter, it's not really universal.
Yeah.
Or is there even
a little bit, but
is there even are the numbers just arbitrary? Like the CFU counts, like is there testing or studies to say
No.
10,000 CFU for a med patient is okay? Like who came up with that number and why?
right.
Yeah, all the numbers are just basically arbitrary.
Yeah, all the numbers are arbitrary. They're just making this shit up, like that's like been the issue that we've had the whole time, is that, show me why this matters.
Right.
Like show me why we need to have ASTME 84 testing certificate on our fucking
Greenhouse
flexible
plastic.
greenhouse plastic.
Yeah.
You guys are just putting shit in there that doesn't make any sense, and it's fucking with us, right? It's really costing us money.
Yeah.
But the problem is that there's no money in the government, right? So you're not going to get people from the industry to come work in the government. And they put anti-competition clause. So like if you were to go work at the CRA, you can't go work for a cannabis company for like 5 years afterwards.
Oh, really? They got a
snap.
non-compete.
Yeah, so they have non-competes.
Wow.
So because they don't want you to go work there, hook a company up, and then go take that job afterwards, right? And they're trying to get away from some sleazy shit, but what they're doing is they're preventing anyone with any real information from getting involved in setting the rules.
Damn,
Yeah,
interesting.
that's a problem.
That's an obstacle for sure.
Yeah, and so like to me, I think they got to get away from that. Like, there's already so much crooked shit happening. Like, it is what it is. You got to get people from the industry involved here, because they're the only ones who know anything about what the fuck is going on.
And the only reason there's so much crooked shit is because it's so overregulated.
Yeah, that's right. And it's like it's overregulated, but it's also underregulated.
Well, yeah,
right?
when you got 1 million plants in the ground, it's pretty hard to keep track of that. There's a lot of room for wiggle.
Yeah, it's overregulated and underenforced.
Right.
It's kind of a shit show. So I don't know. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is I got a 9-month-old kid. Obviously, I don't smoke, but I work in cannabis, so I have a different experience from you guys. How do you all have kids, how do you deal with cannabis and your kids? Do you smoke in front of them? Are you going to let them smoke?
I don't personally. I try to keep some separation there, and that's just me being part of the legacy deal, right? Like, you don't want your kids going to school smelling like anything I don't smoke in the house,
Right.
that kind of stuff. So that's just my personal view on it, but everyone has something different.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. I don't smoke in front of my kids or nothing. My oldest daughter is 16 now, and she's on to me. She knows what's up.
Yeah.
I don't hide it from her, like in the sense of what I do, but I don't smoke near her, around her. I don't smoke in the house or come in the house stinking.
I'm a little bit more laissez-faire, if you will, liberal with it. I think my my son, when he came into my life, I had just started doing cannabis consulting. And then like a year after that, we moved to Colorado. And so I was growing, you know, legally in a greenhouse. And he spent a lot of time with me. And it just kind of became like, hey, that's that plant. And when it came to smoking, you know, we're not trying to hang out in the same room and be lighting up a blunt or anything. But at the same time, you know, the basement and my bedroom pretty much smell consistently. And
Right.
and I'm a everyday user, and you know, my wife is as well, not to the same extent. But you know, the kids know it as cannabis. They know it as medicine. They know that I'm out there working with it and growing it. So to them, it's not even like it's nothing different than what they've expected and known their whole life. So it's a little bit different of a view, I think, from them. I'm lucky in that, like, where Chris is coming from, Trev, where you're coming from, like the you know, fact of the matter is you didn't want, you know, your livelihood to be taken away because your kids smelled. Like, dude, I mean, that's a whole different ball game than what I had. You know, I didn't come
I
up
grew
under
up
that.
differently. Yeah. Like, so my parents all smoked. My dad here smoked. He had, you know, the old rolling tray underneath the couch. Right. And it was like when my dad came home and said, him and his buddy showed up, you know, and he was like, hey, T, why don't you go outside for a bit, you know?
Yeah.
And then you came in, the house smelled like weed, you know, and they had the rolling tray out. Right. And then in California, my parents, the same thing. They had a little ottoman and they had a little rolling tray under there, you know? So like I was exposed to the smell. I knew that they were doing something that adults do. I didn't really know what it was until maybe, I don't know, junior high. And then it was free weed because it was underneath the ottoman.
Yeah.
Couch.
I think I'm still trying to hold on to that wholesomeness. So I have two daughters, 5 and 10. Yeah, I try to.
I think.
Pretty sure.
Yeah.
Trying to keep them as innocent as possible for as long as possible, and that's probably a selfish move on my part, but it is what it is. You know, I don't talk to them about it. My daughter told me once I smelled like burnt chemicals, which has stuck with me. But what do you do? I think once they get a little bit older, we'll have a talk. You know.
Yeah, I don't know. So I've got 3 kids. My oldest daughter's 16. Obviously had her when I was a little younger and life was different. So she's kind of more exposed, knows what's kind of going on. I think I always like went outside in the backyard and smoked or whatever, you know, kind of tried to hide it from her. I used to smoke cigarettes. So at that time, like it was easy to kind of, you know, she probably didn't know the difference. And then quit smoking cigarettes. And then it was like, oh, what are you doing? How come that smells like that? You know, and every time your friends come over, you guys go in the backyard and you stink like a skunk, you know, because Haley's like that. She'll call you on your shit. And so I don't know. She knows what's up. Like she knows I work in weed. She has, you know, driven by the farm. She knows, she knows. The younger kids, I got a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. Like you said, just trying to keep them, you know, just away from it. They don't really know what it is at all. Ryder will ask me why he can't come to my work, you know, and I was, well, it's a farm, but no kids are allowed on the farm. There's lots of like equipment and stuff like that. You know, I just try to explain to him that he can't be there. But yeah, I don't know. I'll probably try to hide it from them as long as I can, you know.
Your daughter's in high school, so that means like her friends obviously probably know what you do. Does that mean that you're like an absolute legend at the high school?
I don't know, man, but it's crazy. I drop her off at school and there's like 50 authentic 231 sweatshirts walking by.
Heck
you know?
yeah.
I'm just dying laughing. Because authentic 231 to me is a little bit more than just weed, right? It's
Yeah.
about this place and the town and just having that stamp there. I believe that they were like talking about telling the kids that they couldn't wear like authentic 231 gear at the school or you know, because they can't have weed or alcohol or whatever.
That's what I was gonna ask.
But I mean, I don't know. It's probably arguable. It's a fucking brand, right? I mean, we sponsored the MRA. There was little kids running around with authentic 231. And hey, it's not like we want kids to smoke weed. We're talking about hiding it from our own half the time. But it's like, no, we want to be a part of the community. We want to show people that, like, you know, we're here. We're part of this. So
We're not drug dealing pieces of shit.
You know, I offered to go and talk at the schools about drugs, right? Because it's better coming from somebody like me than it is coming from some teacher. Like, don't do drugs, you know? Fuck you, teacher. But
Well, we had a Sweet 16 for my daughter a couple months ago, and it was like all these kids at our house. I didn't see one kid like stumbling drunk. I didn't see anyone that smelled like weed or looked like they were smoking. And I was just sitting there amazed because at 16, like what we were doing, you know, I was just waiting, like, where are the kids hiding in the woods with the beer? Where's the ones that are, you know what I mean? Nah, these kids, I don't know. It's just weird. They live different.
It's
you know?
different.
They hang out on the phone. They don't really get down like that. So I don't know if I'm legendary or not. I think at some point, you know, whether it's college or what it is, yeah, her friends are going to want free weed, right?
yeah.
Hey, can you ask your dad if I can get it back?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when we couldn't get weed, we went to my dad. It always worked, you know?
Yeah. I wonder though, because my parents had a very laissez-faire attitude about it. And it didn't go that good, you know? I was a fucking wild man. And so I think about like, all right, so am I going to be hard on my kid? Am I going to be the same as my parents and just kind of let it be what it's going to be? If he's a fuck up, he's a fuck up, you know? So it's it's kind of a tough fucking choice there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think everyone wants their kid to grow up and be this perfect image, but at the end of the day, I think you're just going to support your kid in whatever the fuck they are, you know?
Yeah.
And like, yeah, we were complete fuck ups, you know? I don't think that today. You know, I look around at a lot of people that were like better than me, you know, and man, they're not so much better anymore.
No, they're not.
So it's like, yeah, I'll kind of ride it out, let my kids see what they want. You know, my wife doesn't smoke at all. She hates the smell of weed. It's hilarious, right? Because I've been doing this forever.
Right.
I mean, come home and the garage would be full, like 300 packs or something, the whole house reeking, and she'd be pissed, you know?
Yeah.
And so she has a different view, and she'll say that to me, like, well, what about Haley and her friends? Like, you want Haley to smoke? And it's like, no, I don't want her to smoke. But at the end of the day, if she chooses to smoke, like, I don't give a shit. I've smoked my whole life, like, since I was 13 years old, and it's never held me back really from doing anything, I don't think. I will say that when I quit smoking weed sometimes for a month or two, I'll get like this clarity of like, oh man, I'm sober. I feel so much better, but then that wears off too, you know? and then you smoke and it's like, fuck yeah, this is why I smoke, man. Man, I feel better. So I think it's all just where you're at, you know?
Yeah.
You know, in the headlines I was looking at, there was a headline in Los Angeles at a school, 10 kids overdosed
Oh, I saw that.
on
Edibles.
Yeah.
So like,
Were they eating it on purpose or did they get spiked, right?
That's what the headline. Yeah.
Now, because then that changes that, right? Like if they were, you know, eating it on purpose and they each took like 10 milligrams fucks me up. You eat
Right.
100, right?
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
10 kids overdosing seems.
but what does that mean? You had a hangover the next day?
That's what I'm saying.
You know?
They thought they were going
Somebody
to die.
somebody
and had to go to
stole
the
a
hospital.
packet of gummies from their parents and brought it to school, and all those kids had a meltdown. Because when we came here, I went to the ER for something unrelated, and one of the nurses said, "You know, since you came here, we've had so many marijuana overdoses." They're not really overdoses, right? So you're saying that you had a bunch of panic attacks come in? She's, well, yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, so it's a bunch of panic attacks. I get it. I have a panic attack. I'd have a panic attack if I took a fucking gummy.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. What does that mean to overdose? Pretty hard to overdose on weed. Done a lot of it.
Yeah.
Not fatally.
I've
A little bit of time.
Yeah,
nap,
I mean, I've
you'll be
eaten
all
too
right.
many edibles where like the next morning I was like had a little edible hangover, you know? That's why I don't do them. Like they just kind of put me in a groggy little,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know. So yeah, it could be miseducation that someone just was handing it out. No one knew what they were getting into. It could be that some kid fucking, you know, spiked everyone. Here, have a brownie, have a
Right.
cookie, you know?
Right.
It'd be pretty easy to do, right? Like bring your cookie tray to the potluck.
Yeah, well, I'm suspect of when Daniel brings me. Daniel always cooks food and then drops food off, like whatever he's making. He brings over some for us, and he brought over some brownies like a month ago, and I was like smelling them. They smelled a little bit like weed because he had touched them, and he's like so deeply ingrained. Everything in his pores smells like weed. I fucking call him like, "Are these weed brownies, bro? Are you trying to? Did you fuck up and make weed brownies and accidentally give me some?" Like, no, Camilo was eating this. I taste it. I think I taste weed. Throw the brownies away.
Couldn't
Not
even do
doing
it just because
Couldn't do
they're, I mean, the ones I've gotten from him, they smell like it. Like they're potent.
It's easy to
See,
bite off
that's
more
why I
than
know
you
he's
can chew.
making weed brownies, and I know it could.
You know, like from an access standpoint with the kids, you know, like for us when we have those conversations, it's like, you know, this is medicine, this is stuff for adults, whichever way you want to look at it. But putting it in a safe as much as you can, you know, it's just like kids get a hold of a gun. You know, if you got that in a safe, they're gonna get a hold of whatever you got in your house, no matter if you try your hardest.
Alcohol.
Yeah, and when it comes down to that, like, shit, if my son is 16 years old and I catch him smoking a doobie with his friends and there's no alcohol there, there's no pills, they ain't fucked up on anything else, like, shit, bud, like, make sure you're doing that at home. You're not going anywhere. You're not driving. You know, like that would be the conversation. And it'd be like, hey, man, you could also get arrested. Like, I just want you to understand that. And if you're going to use it like this and that's how it's going to go, I'm not condoning it right now, but I understand, you know, and if you end up getting arrested, you have to suffer the consequences, right?
Pretty much how my parents were. Yeah, our house was the spot. You know, you could go there. We could all go after school and go have a
Right.
sesh at my house. You know, not have to worry about anyone caring, getting caught, or
Yeah,
you know.
my house was very much that too. Everybody, my parents made it a safe place for us, right? And everybody kicked it in the backyard, and it was cool, right? And it was cool for my brother and sister were fine. They didn't even take advantage of that, really. Just me. I took big time.
The fullest
advantage.
extent.
Yeah.
So one of my buddies, his dad smoked weed, and he would always tell us, Jerry, he was always full of shit, and he was like, man, my dad's got the chronic, you know, he's got the shit, because that's how old I am, right, when the chronic came out. And so he would always talk about it. So we're at Jerry's house one day, we're smoking, his dad comes home, and his dad's gonna smoke with us. So we get high, and Rob's there, Vasquez. He doesn't smoke weed hardly ever, right? And he hits a joint a couple times, disappears on us. Everyone's like, man, where'd Rob go? You know, half hour later, like, Rob's still not back. Well, in the meantime, Rob went home. He had a panic attack, basically. Went home, started eating some fucking Doritos. Thought he was choking on a chip. So he calls his cousin Micah. He's like, hey, man, I'm choking on a chip. I can't breathe, right? And Micah's like, nah, bro, you're high as shit. Like, you're talking to me on the phone, you know? And he's like, nah, bro, I feel like I'm going to die. And Micah's like, well, then you better call 911. So he hangs up the phone. He dials 911. Tells him he's choking on a chip, right? So 911 sends an ambulance to his house. So in the meantime, the chip delodges, right? Or whatever. He decides, holy fuck, I just called the cops on myself. So he goes and lays in his bed and like puts the cover over and pretends like he's sleeping. And the police kick down his parents' front door, dude, and go in and get him out of bed and take him. He's a juvenile. So they take him to the hospital. And have to call his parents to like come get him out. That was the only
That's the
time
worst.
that I've ever heard of something like that. We still who ride him to this day. He wants nothing to do with any weed. No,
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
that was it.
I think this year we definitely had a lot more consistent rows out there. Due to planting clones, you just get so much variety with seed. And definitely a different weather shift this year, so that affected us differently than last year. But overall, I mean, we yielded way harder than last year, so that's a huge plus.
And
Double,
the guys, I mean, now it's not their rookie season anymore. These
That too.
guys have, you know, actually there's a crew of them that it was their third season.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, most of the guys came back for a second season, and I think that showed a lot. Like just kind of knowing what to do rather than standing around waiting on being told what to do. I think there's kind of a different atmosphere on the farm this year than there was last year as well.
Yeah, definitely. You know, first season blues, right? Like a lot of growing pains, a lot of struggles. But
A lot more frustration, it seemed like last year.
for sure.
Yeah, because even with the shittier weather this year, it seemed like the guys just kind of handled it better, you know? Like just were a little more consistent.
Yeah, and you know, we also had started prepping in December.
Yeah.
For the season. The previous season, we started prepping in.
March, maybe.
If we're lucky, yeah.
Yeah, and even prepping in December doesn't even feel like you have enough time, right?
Right.
Like you get going in December for like we're about to hit next year, and Chris and I are talking. We're like, oh shit, man, we got all these plans. Like, we got a lot we got to get done, you know. And but like you guys did it that first year. What, like April, May?
Yeah,
like, that
like,
shit's crazy.
We didn't have a fence. We didn't have
Right.
irrigation. We didn't have shit.
All this
you know?
infrastructure.
A lot of infrastructure. Where this year we were fairly set up.
Yeah.
We still changed some things, changed some row layouts and some irrigation layouts, but the hard stuff was pretty much done.
And some of that, like, it seems like that'll change again next
It's
year,
going
right?
to,
Like,
yeah.
it's like you can. I think that's like one of those things where, like, I don't know if you ever get it perfect, you know? Like, every year you're like, fuck, man, if we just had 10 more feet right there and we bump this over, like,
If they were 2 feet wider.
yeah. It's like building your own house. You know, you'd probably build it different 100 times, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, you learn something every time you do it,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, okay, I got to do this differently. And then a new variable pops up the next year. And you're like, oh, shit, okay, well, we never had that much rain before. We got to do this now.
like we did the plastic over the rows, and it seems like we've seen pictures of farms, you know, around the state that are literally like plastic the fucking whole floor,
Right.
if it's plastic or whatever it is. But I mean,
Some type of ground cover. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and it
That'll be a
almost
game
seems like
changer.
that would be where it's really at to get that next level of smokable out of the field.
Yeah, I think you're gonna prohibit some of that septoria from spreading like crazy because it's the green bridges that you got. You know, weeds, one weed to the next, and it just pop all throughout the field. So I think you take that out, and the labor. I mean, the fact that you don't have to maintain that is a huge plus.
Yeah, that's always been like since the first year, right? Like coming from Cali, you got to grow out. It's the Golden State is dead. It's weeds, right? It's like dead grass. So if you had those rows, you walk those rows 3 times. That's now a dirt row, right? And it's like that your entire season. There ain't fucking a weed that's gonna grow in that bitch. You know what I mean? Like you have it's just a dust bowl and then your weed plant. Whereas here, that first season, we're like, holy fuck, like you got to mow this twice a week. We had people spending like 80% of their time mowing with a lawnmower, push mowers, like down fucking rows rather than playing with the plant, right?
We had dudes bleeding because they were chafing from walking so much with the mower, and it was so wet and sweaty out there. There was
Just
blood
miles.
running down their leg and shit. Like,
Yeah, it's crazy.
And we didn't get away from completely maintaining this year, but it was less, from what I understood, than last year, right?
Well,
And
even
then
if you hit the rows, it's what, half?
right,
You
yeah,
know? 50% or 40%
point.
less.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, it was a huge difference, I think.
Yeah.
And then also that stuff growing around the plant is what's getting up there and touching and,
Yeah.
you know, causing the stuff at the bottoms to,
commingling with the nastiness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, that seems like next level.
We also had the problem this year, which, you know, Chris and I were standing there going, you know what, let's save some time, let's save some resources, let's not put a T-post here, let's extend it just a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. And we were thinking, no problem. But our plants ended up being a little bit bigger than we anticipated, a little bit windier than we anticipated.
Heavier.
Yeah, heavier. So now it's like, all right, we could bring back in, you know, to 5 plants, every T-post, every 5 plants.
Yeah.
And that's going to change it for us. But that's where you were the year before. So
Yeah,
it's like
you might
just-
want to be 4 because we're going to grow monster, right?
Yeah.
Like so it's like,
Right.
yeah, you
Well,
probably want to shrink from the original.
it'll probably go to 4 because if we go to 8-foot spacing next year,
Yeah.
Great point. Yeah. So that it's and that's the fun in all of this. To
Yeah.
me, it's like, yeah, we're doing it again, but we're doing a little different.
A little better.
Yeah.
what'd that one guy say? He's like, oh, you got tons of experience. He's like, oh, I've had 30 chances at it. He's been farming 30 years.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
He-
it's not like
yeah.
you're shooting a basketball
Yeah,
over and over
no,
and over.
It's a crazy feeling, right? And he's like, yeah, man, just 30 shots. That's it. You know, got to get better every year. A whole hell of a lot.
It's crazy to only be able to take one shot every year,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot fucking riding on one shot.
Man.
A lot
So
of planning.
yeah, so like we're talking about the distillate markets in the shitter. We want to get more smokable flower out of our field next year. How does the plant care change from 2022 to 2023?
I think basically giving them a little more spread, a little more space next year. Also the ground cover,
Yeah.
not mowing so much around them, you know, kicking up all those clippings and dust, and that'll be huge for those 2 things alone on quality, you know.
We also realized that, you know, the best smokable that we're going to get are from those choice colas. on the plants. So instead of last year, we had kind of looked at it like, all right, you know, these 4,500 plants are going to be dedicated to smokable flower. We're kind of looking at it like, you know, we should be every single plant should
Top
be
of the field.
Yeah, it should be a candidate for getting the best tops off of there at the prime time. And so like that, in addition to being a little bit further prepared ahead of time, maybe getting one earlier dry cycle. You know, harvesting 7 days, 10 days earlier. If we can get the cultivars that are going to line up with that, that'll really help us pack in more pounds.
Right. Doing more variety next
Yeah.
year too as well.
Yep.
Talking about doing 10 different cultivars versus this year we had 5 main ones.
Right.
And the reason 5 was important for us, it felt like, was, you know, the headache of all those seed phenos from the first year that I kept hearing about it. Like, hey, let's take it easy and let's plant as few cultivars as we can, but as much as we can to get the variety. And I think we saw some improvements on how we did metric out in the field in terms of sequence and then getting it into the system. So now we're like, all right, we can have more variety. We just need to organize it in a certain way.
Yep.
And that 10 will help us, you know, have some more flavors.
Yeah, and running seed phenos is like impossible to harvest. You've got like 3 plants in this trellis section that are ready and 2 that aren't. So what do? You got to take the 3 that are ready. So you're cutting it out. Now these 2 are flopping on the ground. So you got to take those 2.
Right.
And they weren't ready, you know?
Yeah.
Do you have some phenos that finish early?
We had one, the potato runts, but it ended up not being very stable. We still have it.
We still have it. Yep. We have a.
But we think it might have been triggered by the light from the processor building because it kind of hermed on us a little bit in areas.
that backlight.
That was before we got it shut off. Yeah,
Yep.
right.
Yeah.
Out there.
And it was also the most susceptible to the septoria. So we're talking about getting rid of it, but
We found a winner that we have to build up the mother stock of from that variety trial and pheno hunt that we did outdoors. So Spaniel found one that's early, kind of around the potato runts timing, and it didn't have nearly the septoria damage.
the cherry pie cross.
Yeah. Is that VS1?
Cherry pie by VS1.
Yeah. So I think that one shows a lot of promise for us to have an early one that didn't hurt me on us.
And that was a shitty. We extracted that already. It
Yeah,
was
it
really
smells
nice.
amazing.
Yeah.
That was always my favorite
Cherry
genetics.
pie. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the smell of
It's
that
unique.
plant.
You know, I haven't really seen that on the market out here.
No.
Yeah, so we'll double down on that. But like you said, having that spectrum, the full spectrum of early finishing, mid finishing, and even late. And I would have told you last year when I first started here, well, I don't fucking want any late finishing cultivars out here. But now that I see, like, hell yeah, there's some that can take it. Like,
Yeah,
let's
'cause-
find that.
yeah.
We want that amount
And
of
you
time.
need the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we turn, like, if we had a late finisher and really early finishers, could we do 4 cycles in our dry rooms? Like that, that's the kind of game we're looking for, because your infrastructure becomes limited at some point. And then it's
Right.
like, how do you use the plants to
Yeah.
fill it?
To manip that. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be fucking awesome. How are you guys feeling about greenhouse flower? Because the way that the market has looked to me is like, historically there was outdoor pricing, greenhouse pricing, and indoor pricing. And I feel like greenhouse pricing is kind of washed out, right? Like there's no necessarily like a
Benefit or
benefit. But then, can we get the costs low enough to make it, feasible to grow in greenhouses still?
I like the ability that the greenhouse gives you, just weather-wise and being able to control their environment a little better. But yeah, if the price is down and it doesn't make sense that way, then it's kind of tough. But I think for the fresh frozen and the live, the quality is like amazing.
Yeah, we definitely saw a difference, right?
Yeah.
From between the runs we've done so far,
Yeah.
between the greenhouse and the outdoor, with the same cultivar.
Yeah.
I mean, you're seeing a difference for sure.
Yeah. Processing quality is up, overall smell seems up, color
Yeah.
seems like it's a little bit
Definitely better.
lighter overall. But from like a smokable flower quality, I was blown away with what we produced in the greenhouse. We took some down to closet cure, if you will, to figure out how they smoke, and holy, I was impressed. Like the team got a bunch of love after smoking that, because I wasn't expecting you could put out that kind of quality in the greenhouse. And I think we'll see that kind of quality, if not better, in the indoor. But if you can put out that in the greenhouse, and we can do it at the price I think we can do it at, as we get more runs,
Seems like there's a market for that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, I think greenhouse has always been associated closer with indoor than outdoor is with greenhouse.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So,
Yeah, it was always you were trying to grow greenhouse weed that could pass as indoor.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And then if it wasn't, you would get that kind of in between
Price.
pricing.
Yeah,
But I knew a lot of guys who were passing off greenhouse for indoor.
for sure.
Yeah.
All day.
Yeah.
And then you got guys like Glasshouse who are growing greenhouse flower below $150 a pound.
Common Citizen, I mean, their whole thing, they're all greenhouse as well, right? They're huge
Yep.
Yeah.
in the state here.
Yeah. They put a lot of money into that facility. That was as expensive as building an indoor facility.
Their flower kind of sucks.
Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of one of the things,
It's hit
right?
or miss. So I've seen it really good from them before. Like when we were first getting their product, like that LA Kush cake was nice, and then it seemed like it kind of.
Well, I think some of
tapered a little bit.
those big grows, won't mention names, but we've been at others as well. And I think they're always sacrificing the quality at the end because their production schedule is so heavy. It's
They
like
don't have the dry space. And,
yeah, it's like they always sacrifice. We were at one, I don't know how many lights they had, freaking 1,000 lights, and they had one dry room. It's like, well, why not just shut down two of these flower rooms and convert them, right?
Right.
Like,
that was. Oh, yeah, you don't want to say.
yeah.
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 But yeah, just like,
Yeah.
hey man, one little tweak and your quality goes up. But for them, they're like, well, the market doesn't really call for that right now. It's about producing flower and just getting it out the door.
Yeah, but could they get that better price point if they had a better cured product? That's where they're.
Yeah, mindset's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, Jesse, and I think he's still getting money for his packs, right? But he's holding that high standard of quality, right? That's all he's trying to push is like craft cannabis. I think Michigan's prices are still like fairly decent in the market, right? Like, and they have that same idea, right? They don't want to sell out. They want that craft cannabis market and put out special phenos and put in the extra work to it,
I think that's like the question of the last 5 years is, can you scale craft cannabis? Because almost everybody who is scaled produces mids, right?
It's definitely a tricky endeavor is scaling with quality.
Seems like it's a combination of having the right people on the bus in the right spots as you scale, and like really investing in the team who's going to run it and how they're going to do it. And part of that's the equipment and the facilities. But I would say I would take a dedicated badass team running a 15, 20-year-old greenhouse over $5 million facility and some Chads and Brads and Thads,
100%.
Yep.
Yeah. Like Exotic Matter, he said he's got 54 lights, right? He probably runs that by himself or with
It's probably got
one
a couple,
guy.
Him and a guy or something.
couple
I
guys,
imagine.
yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Nobody's ever going to be as good as you. Nobody's ever going to be as good as you. The farther you get away from the plants, the more the quality goes down, right?
Right.
And I think a lot of it comes down to that last couple weeks of not even your harvest, but your trim and your hang. Those are all super important things. And when you rush those, that's when all your hard work goes down the tube.
Well, and I think the wholesale market as well for the exotic, like that higher dollar stuff is a lot less, right? So when you try to scale up, like you got, 54 lights, bring down 100 pounds, you got, a month to get rid of it or whatever, like that's doable. But if you had 500 of those pounds at that higher price, it's probably hard. I mean,
Yeah.
that Michigan's different in that sense, right? We see that in our stores. It's like people here aren't shopping really for that craft cannabis good weed. They're shopping for deals. Like in Cali, we go in the store, we're like, what's the newest shit you got? Let me see the most fire. And there's some dude behind there that really knows weed that's like, oh, bro, you got to see this right here. He's telling you what it is, popping open. You're like, holy fuck, yeah, give me that, Like, you don't really get that here. I go all over the state. Let me see what's in that bag,
What's the
And
cheapest stuff you got? That's what they say.
Yeah, but even me, I go for what's the most expensive, like
No, I
what's
know,
the most
but-
exotic shit, and it's not what what it's supposed to be.
It's not
most
that
of the
exotic
time.
shit.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, Exotic Matters got some fire.
Yeah.
Michigan's latest stuff like that. Skittles is a real deal, right? Like
Yeah.
these guys got some real shit, So it's nice to see in the market. I just don't know if it is scalable based off the wholesale level because the retails aren't selling that product. I mean, maybe in Detroit it's a whole different ballgame, but then now you're a med market, right?
Right.
Like
It's a much slower scale if you're going to scale. Like, you have to, it's building a following really at that point. It's
And what do
people
you
that
what do you
want
think is
that
going to
weed.
happen to the market when Detroit opens up for rec?
I mean, I guess it all depends on how many licenses they give out, how spread out, I mean, but Detroit's a big city. It's got
city.
Ohio right there. It's got New York right there. It's got,
I would think
you'd be
it would
surprised
create
what people.
a vacuum up front of the rec product, depending how much is sitting.
It's 100 licenses now
100.
on their ordinance, phased out over a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, so you're talking only really like if all of those stores open on the same day and inventoried 100 pounds a piece, like
Yeah.
it's not
Not
that
making a
much,
dent.
man.
Right. All the million plants in the ground.
Yeah, and that's in the ground, right? Or you're saying total licenses, or that's
That
outdoor?
was outdoor. only.
Yeah, so
Outdoor
imagine fucking there's another how many indoor, how many greenhouse, like yeah, there's too many.
Only thing is Michigan's such a tough climate that it's not all, you can't count all those million plants as actually going to hit the market, right? Like,
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. How many of those finished?
Right.
Out of 1 million, how many finished? 100,000?
I know people that
200,000?
were purposely not harvesting outdoor plants because they didn't have anywhere to go with it.
Just letting them die off or
That's
something?
it. Sitting in the field, whole plant dead. Just yeah.
That hurts.
All the space was filled for drying. They had, they had taken tops off of a lot of it. Some of the plants hadn't been topped at all, but it was like, hey, we have no place to go with this, and it does us no good to put money into it.
And that's why the scale is so important. Like what we're trying to figure out right now for next year, it's like how much do you grow that you can handle and get the improvements that you want to not ever have a plant that sits out in the field dead. Because
Yep.
yeah,
It's tough.
That's brutal, right? You're paying for that license, paying for that everything that went into it
The
all year to
labor, the
just see it.
inputs.
Yep.
Yeah.